Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior professional from India, Mr. Jayaram Eswaran. Jayaram, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh.
Jayaram is an author, he's a speaker and a management consultant. He's an author of a book titled Inside the C-Suite. He's an independent director with Jindal Stainless Limited and Concord Biotech Limited. So, Jayaram, let's start with your journey. Tell me about your journey in brief.
First of all, thank you very much for having me on the show, Ashutosh. I am delighted. I am the son of an army officer, and I lived quite a sheltered and comfortable life in the cantonments. And being an army officer's son, your ambitions are limited to joining the army like your father. I was very keen, but I got rejected because of my eyesight being a little less than the standards. It really broke me up, but I think the learning at that time through this setback stood me good stead in my career going forward. Maybe I will touch on it at the right time. From there, I did my graduation and then worked in the DCM Limited, and then moved on to the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore. And thereafter, I have worked in Indian and global corporations, both technology companies and brick and mortar companies. And fortunately, I have worked in different functions. So I have had an exposure to most of the functions, and I have also been the CEO of an advertising agency. So, been there, done that, and here I am. Thank you.
Wonderful. So, you have held leadership positions in technology companies and brick and mortar companies. Why do technology companies pamper their employees so much, unlike brick and mortar companies?
This, I think, is a wonderful question, and it is something that all the kids today looking for careers must be conscious of. And the answer to your question, Ashutosh, really lies in the P&L statements of these companies. One has only to look at the ratio between the employee cost and the revenue of the company to tell you who are the key business drivers within the company. Is it the people, or is it a lot of other things like technology and a few other things that matter? In process control companies like, in ours, where I'm a director, or even in the petrochemical complexes, etc., very large 3-4 lakh crore kind of companies, the employee cost is somewhere between 1.2 to 1.5%. If you take the auto industry, it's between 7 to 10%. Take the pharma industry, it's between 12 to 15%. But come to the IT industry, it can be anywhere between 48 to 52%. So now you know who the key business drivers are. Every time I saw an empty table or chair in the IT companies where I worked in, I actually saw loss of contribution margin. So I speak, at campuses a lot, and this is what I tell the kids. Make sure that you are a key business driver, or you work in a function that is a key business driver. Look at recently what happened with Twitter, laying off 7,500 people, and most of them who went were not really, business drivers, as it was mentioned. I'm sure same thing has happened in Meta. So these are very important things to keep in mind while going forward. And the reason why, again, technology companies pamper is because their assets walk out in the evening and come back the next day. And they need to come back. And I remember when we got acquired by a very large brick and mortar company internationally, $20 billion, the chairman kept asking me, why is it that you guys always push back, and in the brick and mortar companies, I have to just give an instruction and things happen? And I told him, listen, out there, people join for a job. Here, people join for a career. If you can't help them enhance that, they will walk out. This is broadly the key reason why technology companies actually have to pamper, because their assets are all the ones who walk out in the evenings.
Very interesting. And how can companies ensure their employees are engaged?
A lot of this has to do with the leadership, because it sounds very cliched, but I think if the leadership, especially at the top, is authentic, communicates well, is compassionate, I think this then affects everybody in the company. And like I said, it's not a cliche because I've worked in organizations where I have seen top managements, being extremely compassionate and, transparent. Because at the end of the day, Ashutosh, credibility, the brand is something that the people must trust. If the stakeholders don't trust your brand, the brand is gone. Similarly, as individuals, if people don't build their own personal credibility, and today you can see, some of the top CEOs, where are they having, played the kind of games there with their own companies? Some of them are in the cooler. And employees are also not stupid. They want to see, what is it? Because commitment is always a two-way street. If the leadership is committed, the employees are bound to be committed. I'll give you one or two small examples, I think, which will also help the viewers. When I spoke of transparent communication, I worked in a chip design company in the US with 15 centers globally. And today, in the connected world, the word of mouse is much faster than the word of mouth. So a rumor, if one company, one division, one development center, there's some rumors happening, it will spread very quickly within 24 hours everywhere else. So we had this young dynamic CEO who had formed a leadership team of some 40 of us across these 15 centers. I was the one from India. And he used to have these regular calls with us. And first thing he would ask is, what are the rumors in your development centers? And I remember from 2 centers, the senior leader said that there is a rumor that our company is up for sale. So he then asked us, how important is it in your own? Because he didn't want to fuel the rumor if it's not a rumor everywhere else. And finally, he chose to answer us saying that, guys, there's one very large client of us who's doing due diligence on us, but to give us a huge account. So maybe somebody has seen that company here. So do you want me to address it in the next, town hall? They said, yes, you must. So in the next town hall, he said that I'm hearing these rumors, but it's not a rumor. I can't name the client. So that became so important. The other thing I'd like to talk about, I think, which is very, very core to this issue of building engaged employees. It is, I'm sure we all know of this gentleman called Walter Cronkite. In the 70s, he was a CBS newsreader. And 10 p.m. newsreader, and a couple of surveys done in America, he was rated as the most trusted man in America because, and they said that maybe the way he talks, he passes the news, doesn't give his opinion, and we believe him more than the media. How many Walter Cronkites are there in our own companies is important. I worked in a company where there was this rumor of some 700, 800 people going to be laid off, and we had to contain that rumor. When I spoke to my CEO, and of course he was, like Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in the company. So he said, I can't say this in the town hall that there's no list of layoffs. So I told him, don't say that. Just say, as I stand here today, there is no list. But if at all we have to prepare a list, I'll be the first one to tell you. Believe you me, Ashutosh, this topic of layoffs was dropped off the agenda of the kids when they were sitting in the dining hall and elsewhere. The critical thing is, how many Walter Cronkites do you have in your company? And are you yourself the Walter Cronkite in your company and your team? I think this is, I'm talking of the software aspects. This is so critical. And I think most organizations fail on this front.
Very interesting. So you also spent time, Jayaram, in the human resources function. And I remember when I started working for ITC, in those days, 79, 80, there was a personnel manager, there was an industrial relations manager, and so on. Today, the CHRO role is a very, very powerful role as a part of the C-suite. Why are CEOs so dependent on the CHRO today?
Well, you see, what is it that occupies the mind of a CEO today? Because the CEO shelf life itself is shortening. And he is measured mostly by the stakeholders, who want him to deliver on the share price, deliver on quarter results and things like that. The CHR's role is quite a bit, it's a softer aspect of the organization. And that is where the CEO depends. But here I have a important point to make. If the CEO himself is a people-oriented person and he is a transformational leader, then the CHRO can thrive in that environment. It's the ideal environment. But unfortunately, what happens is that while the CEO is focused on a lot of other things, one thing I've observed as I grew in my career was that there are certain functions where, because all of us, when we join a company, we want to stand up and be counted. There are certain functions where you deliver, let us say, numbers, or you deliver marketing, etc., where this can be easily measured. But there are functions which are not easily measurable. So what do? You fall into the trap of trying to justify your existence. And I think this is where many HR folks have also fallen into. So I think if the top man is people oriented, he will work. And like I told you, the reason they're dependent on them is because they are so focused on some of the other aspects of the business. A good CHRO, a self-actualized CHRO, a CHRO who doesn't have to struggle to justify his existence, who becomes the voice of the people. I think such CHROs are, worth their weight in gold, and these are the ones that CEOs really depend on.
Very interesting. So let's move to your book now, Jayaram. Your book is titled Inside the C-Suite. Tell me a little bit about your book and your hypothesis when you started writing it.
All of us are good at certain things. I am not a smart cookie. I'm not as sharp as most people. But yes, one part of my brain works beautifully, and that's his ability to retain memory. I can, even today, like when I learned book writing, the first thing we had to do was write our memoirs. You had to go back into the past. I could go back into when I was 3 and 4 years old as to what happened to me. So, and I love telling stories because it is so much easier to make a point by telling stories. So a lot of my friends also told me that, you regale us with your stories. Why don't you write for a larger audience? So one of the reasons why I started writing, because I have a natural affinity to observe what people do. And mostly, like in writing also, in screenwriting also, what people say, the text is not the real thing. What is not being said is the real thing. So I used to observe a lot of, so why do people behave the way they do? A lot of so-called leaders that I had worked with, some of them were men of feet of clay. And so as a youngster, I kept observing, and I realized that the higher a person was in the hierarchy, the more insecure they were. And I kept wondering, why is this happening? And I didn't want to become one of those. And I realized that at the highest levels in the organizations, your ability to deal with ambiguity is more important. And I found, and this is just, I say it in a very, lighter vein, but I think a lot of people at the top are paid much more than they deserve. And they also are paid much more than they need. So the stakes are much higher for them, and hence they tend to become a little insecure. The other important learning, which I think is must share here, is I observed that at all levels in a company, there were only 4 levels at each. Like, if you take a manager, there were 4 levels of managers. The lowest level of manager was the manager who competed with their subordinates because they were insecure. The next level 2 were the ones who competed with their bosses. They were the political animals. Level 3 were the ones who competed with their peers in the organization and their classmates elsewhere. But level 4 were the ones who actually competed with themselves. And this can happen at any level. You can find this at the assistant manager level or at the C-suite C level.
Right.
When I observed a lot of these things, I said that the real bottleneck in a company is always at the top. And I call these people at the top, and I was one of them, as the crocodiles. And it is said that you never fight a crocodile in water, right? So I wrote this book as a means, through 21 short stories, meant to tell the youngsters that this book will teach you how to fight crocodiles in water.
Okay.
So it's based on true episodes in my career, and I learned to write. So I created a protagonist, antagonist, and a conflict, and I wrote these short stories.
And can you give me any one particular example? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Give me any one example from your book or one of your stories.
Yes. When I was working in an automotive company, we were manufacturing trucks and selling trucks. And the organization is structured in such a way that there are 4 regions in the country headed by 4 sales managers. And then there will be one gentleman who looks after institutional sales, and he's supposed to sell across the country. every time we met, because in these companies, you got to meet your numbers. So we used to meet on the 1st of the month and 15th of the month to review the performance. The regional managers would never get the flag because they would invariably meet their numbers. In fact, they have some in their own pocket, which they will bring next month into the next month's quota. But this poor guy, the senior guy who was heading institutional sales, he used to get it in the neck always, because institutional selling, the cycle times are longer. The government would want to buy 200 vehicles, plus suddenly this whole thing gets delayed and delayed. So he would get it in the neck to the extent that he didn't know what was happening. So after one such tough meeting for him, I went up to him and asked him, have you ever taken the CEO to meet one of your customers? He says, how can I do it? That place doesn't have a place to sit. It doesn't have a toilet, and it's going to be very frustrating. I said, listen, the reason why he has unrealistic expectations from you is because he has no clue as to what constraints you are facing. Take him next time to one of these. And he took him the next time. And the experience was so horrifying that every subsequent meeting, the CEO would ask him, did you get to eat something when you went there last time? Did he see you one time? And I think that made the difference to his own existence. And I've titled it as, walk a mile in my shoes. So if you find that your boss is not appreciating what you're doing, don't criticize, don't crib about it. Try and see if you can help him walk a mile in your shoes. He will then be a mentor instead of a boss.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing the story. My next question about, on your book is, what are some of your key observations from inside the C-suite?
Well, I would say some of the key observations were, and these have all come out in short stories. One is, and this is again personal experience, how you treat your subordinate when they fail you. Because everybody is bound to fail, success and failure. How you treat them when they fail you? Do you hurt their dignity? Do you yell at them? Do you make a public display of their inefficiencies? Or do you call and tell them that, listen, I think this is okay, you failed, but let's not do it again. Let's see what we can learn from this. If you do not hurt their dignity, this is very important learning, and I tried to implement it. If you do not hurt their dignity when they fail you, but you tell them you believe in them. If they're useless, get rid of them. But if you think this is what's happened, believe you me, they will walk out of your cabin swearing by you and not swearing at you. And if you have your employees swearing by you, believe I've done this. I failed once. All these things happened to me. And then I walked out of my CEO's cabin. I said, I will never let this man down again. So that is what many people don't get. You said, how do you build employee engagement? This is how you treat them. The other learning that I had from my book was, these are observations, like in life with friends, so with your colleagues in the office, how you talk to them and how you talk about them will determine whether the team stays for long or not. I can say great things about you, Ashutosh, but if I say poor things behind your back, it will come back to you. And what does it do? It affects our relationship. So this is the other big thing I learned. The third thing I really learned was, humility. I've seen leaders who were humble, not full of themselves, and they believed that they needed the team to help them. That really struck a chord and made things happen in a much better way than as it would happen in most other places. So these are and then of course, this is another learning personal experience. When I would hire, I realized that all things being equal, I would hire lady employees because they just the way they just as they were the bedrock for their own families and they multitask. Even in organizations, they bring so much credibility to the role and to the organization. So these are some of my learnings.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Any more books in the pipeline?
Yes, I am writing a book now, which is through HarperCollins, amongst the biggest publishers in the world, and this is due to be given to them sometime in March, April. But I want to share something very interesting with the audience, because there are people who, are also interested in writing. Sometime in November 2019, I went to the UK to attend a program on script writing with this gentleman called Robert McKee. He's 82 years old, but in the last 30 years, 60 of his students have won Academy Awards.
Mhm.
200 have been nominated. So that is one thing that I am also trying to work on, and maybe I'll like to write a script, because in when you see a movie or when you write a book, what the book is about is the premise,
Mhm.
but the theme is what the book readers will take home. The author will never talk about the theme in that book.
Mhm.
So I'm not only trying to write. I'm only not only trying to write a book on in the corporate world, which will be quite, I think, quite brutal, because I'm going to tell the truth there. But more importantly, I'm also in the process of writing a few scripts. But one or two things I also learned when you asked me about my book writing and watching organizations is that all of us must cultivate a hobby.
Mhm.
You have written so many wonderful books. You're doing these podcasts, so you have something to do when hang up your boots.
Mhm.
I have seen a lot of my colleagues who are in the verge of retirement or retirement actually who don't know what to do. So very early in your life, try and cultivate a hobby, get into a sport. And
Mhm.
the other biggest learning I had, which I used, was there must come a time in our lives when we must stop trying to live a glorious life in the minds of others.
Mhm.
Otherwise, life is a constant struggle, this whole materialistic acquisition phase.
Mhm.
So greed is a bad thing. But the learning for me there was, fall back. Treat your job as something that will take care of your bodily needs. For the needs of your soul, fall back on your family, your readings, your mentors, and your close friends. And this is so important to retain sanity in this fast changing world.
Mhm. Very interesting. I've got time for one more question, and that normally is a question on 3 lessons. You've already shared several lessons, but for my young viewers and listeners, based on your own journey, what would you say are 3 learnings or 3 lessons you want them to take away from your own journey and from our conversation?
Well, one lesson which I learned through trial and error is all of us have some values which we ingrained from our parents or our reading or our mentors. Be clear on what those values are, because it is not necessarily the organization that you join will reflect the same values.
Yeah.
So if you can identify what your values are and what you're really comfortable with, then you can find organizations which more or less resonate with your values. So join these companies so that you realize that you don't have to struggle too much within yourself. So that's the first big lesson that we have to, which I have learned and which I would like to advise.
Right.
The second very big lesson, because like I told you, when I was young, an army officer's son, I couldn't get into the army because of weak eyesight. As you grow in the company, you realize a colleague of yours gets promoted faster than you. Success comes to somebody else, material success. So that can depress you. That's what, when I started thinking that when I realized that physically I had a deficiency, I accepted that reality in my life. So it didn't bother me after that. Similarly, all people are not cut out to do the same thing.
Right.
So you must understand that internally also we are not equal. So if sometimes you miss the boat, accept it as something you don't have. So that acceptance makes living that much more easier.
Okay.
Rather than, and this is the problem that many people have. This is the second learning. The third biggest learning I would say is, well, this is born out of this is, I wish organizations and schools especially taught children how to cope with the highs and lows in life. Because around us, and today with social media being there, Instagram, you post something and you look for likes, and how you're accepted is decided on those things. Hopefully we should teach our children to be a little more, their emotional crutches need to be within them. And the last thing, of course, most important thing is today, layoffs are a reality. Look, suddenly you get a mail saying you're not wanted. I was laid off twice, not for no fault of mine, because one, the organization shut down after 9/11, and the other one, the top management, we were acquired. So invariably, after some time, the top management is shunted out. But initially, in India specifically, we take layoffs as we let it affect our self-worth, as though something is deficient within us. Don't do that. Remember, it comes with the territory. Just like a company decides to get rid of you, we also get rid of companies when we resign them. Take that in your stride. Don't let it affect your psyche, and just keep going ahead and look ahead.
Wonderful. And on that note, Jayaram, and your wonderful lessons, which are, be clear about your values and try and match your values with the value systems of the organization. Accept your reality. I think that's a very, very important a piece of advice or lesson you have given, because everyone can't have everything. Number 3, you said, was learn to cope with the highs and lows of life. And 4th one, accept the fact that in today's world, layoffs are a reality. Thank you so much for speaking to me about your journey. Thank you for talking to me about what's been happening in your life and in the corporate world, about how employees can be engaged, about the CHRO function. And finally, thank you so much for talking to me about your book, Inside the C-Suite. Thank you again, and good luck.
Thank you again, Ashutosh. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.